In this video, we're going to talk about 10 functions that are typically used in Excel. So the first one that we're going to go over is the average function. So let's say we have a group of numbers 15, 27, 42, 93, 56, 84, 75, 33, and 49. If you want to find the average of these numbers, type in equal average parentheses and then highlight the column of data that you want to average. And so the average of these numbers is 53.125. And so that's a very simple way in which you can use the average function in Excel. Now let's say if you want to average two numbers quickly. You can type in equal average and then let's say we want to average 100 and 200. So type in 100 comma 200 close parentheses and you get 150. If you want to average three numbers, you can type in the three numbers. Let's say 100, 200, and 300. The average of those three numbers is 200. And so that's another way in which we can use the average function in Excel. Now, the next function that we're going to talk about is the sum function. So let's say if we want to add up some numbers. So if we wish to find the sum of the numbers in this list, we can type in equal sum parentheses and then highlight the column that you want to find the sum of. And so the sum of those numbers is 429. And just like before, if we want to, we can just find the sum of two numbers. Let's say 50 and 125. 50 plus 125 is 175. You can also type in equal 50 plus 125. And as you can see, you'll get the same answer. Now let's say if you want to find the sum of three numbers. You can type in equal sum 100, comma 200, comma 300. And that'll give you 600. Or you can write it this way, equal 100 plus 200 plus 300. And so there's different ways in which you can add up numbers using the sum function. And so that's the second function that we're going to talk about in this video. Now, the third function is going to be the SUMIF function. So let's compare that with the sum function. The sum function allows us to calculate the sum of a range of values. Let's say if we want to find basically the sum of all of these vehicles, we can just use the sum formula. But let's say if we want to use the SUMIF formula, how will that help us? Let's highlight this particular cell. So I'm going to give it a yellow color. So let's say if we want to find the sum of only the Mazda vehicles. So we don't want to find the sum of all these numbers, but just basically a selected sum. We want to find the sum of a certain element in this list. So what we need to do is type in equal SUMIF parentheses, and then we need to select a range. So the range will be the card type, and then comma, the criteria will be based on whatever is in this cell, cell B14, and then comma, the sum range, so these are the numbers that we wish to add. Close parentheses, enter. This should be the card type actually, instead of Mazda. Now we're going to put the word Mazda in this cell. And so notice that we get the total sum of all the Mazda vehicles. So that's 125 plus 142 plus 425. And you could check it. If you type in equal sum 125 comma 142 comma 425, it will give you 692. Now you could change it. Let's say if we want to find the sum of the Honda vehicles, it's automatically going to adjust. There's only one type of Honda vehicle in this list, so it's 174. If we want to find the sum of all the Toyota vehicles, just type it in and it automatically gives us a sum. So we have 326 for Toyota, 89, and 274. So if we type in equal 326 plus 89 plus the other one, which is 274, we get 689. So the SUMIF function helps us to find the sum of a certain element in this list rather than the sum of all of these numbers in that list. Now let's move on to our fourth function, which is going to be the count function. So how can we use the count function? The count function allows us to count. If you read it, it says it counts the number of cells in a range that contains numbers. So we can use it to count this column. And so we have a total of 10 cells that contains numbers. So this is the first one, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, 9, 10. So there's 10 cells that contain numbers. Now, if you try to use it with a column of data that don't contain numbers, you're going to get a value of 0. So that's the fourth function, the count function. It helps you to count the number of cells with numbers. The next one is the COUNTA function or COUNTA function. And so this function allows you to basically count the number of cells that are not empty. So these could be cells with a text or a number. So if we highlight these cells, we're going to get a count of 10. Now let's say if we have Mazda, if we have a number 25, let's say we have Toyota, and then 37, and then let's say a Jim, let's say Carla 12. If we try to use the count function on this, it's only going to count two numbers because it counts 25 and 37. It doesn't count this one, which contains letters and numbers. So that's the count function. If we use the COUNTA function or the COUNTA function, it'll count every function that is not empty. And so it counts all of these functions. If we try to use it on this entire range, it still gives a 6. It doesn't count the empty cells. Now there is a function that does count the empty cells, and that is the count blank function. So notice that we have 3 empty cells, 1, 2, 3. And so that's the count blank function. So now you know how to use the count and the COUNTA function in Excel. So number 6 will be the COUNTIF function. So the COUNTIF function is very similar to the SUMIF function. It allows us to count a selection in this entire column. So let's change this to COUNTIF. And so this is going to be equal COUNTIF, and then we need to select the range. So this will be the range, and then the criteria, which is a cell, will be whatever is in a cell B14. So notice that it tells me how many times Toyota is listed in this list. And so we have 1, 2, 3. Now let's choose Mazda. Actually, let's choose something different. Let's choose Honda. Honda should be listed once. Now I'm going to add another Mazda to the list. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So actually, let's replace Toyota with Mazda, because the selection stops here. So I have a total of 4 Mazda car types in this list. So if I change it to Mazda, it will count 4. Now I only have 2 Toyota vehicles in this list. So if I change it to Toyota, I will get 2. And so that is the COUNTIF function. So instead of counting all the car types that we have here, which should be about 10, if we use the count function. The COUNTIF function allows us to count a certain selection in that list. It can allow us to count only the Toyota vehicles or only the Mazda vehicles. And so that's how you can use the COUNTIF function in this example. Next up, we have our next function,